Millionaire abandons pregnant girlfriend. Seeing her begging for help destroys him. 4 words makes him cry. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The July heat shimmered across Seattle's skyline as James Harrison stepped out of his sleek Tesla. 6 years abroad had transformed him from a promising tech entrepreneur into a global business titan, with a fortune Forbes estimated at $3.2 billion. At 38, his once boyish features had matured into the sharp, confident angles of a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. "I'll walk from here," he told his driver, straightening his custom Italian suit. "This traffic is pointless." James needed to clear his head before tomorrow's board meeting. His company, Harrison Innovations, was poised to announce a revolutionary AI platform that would cement his legacy in the tech world. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned, until it wasn't. The pristine corridors of Seattle General Hospital weren't part of his itinerary, but his physician had insisted on a follow-up for his recent physical. Executives rarely made time for such trivialities, but James had learned the hard way that health couldn't be delegated. As he approached the reception area, a commotion caught his attention. A woman was pleading with the receptionist, her voice containing that particular pitch of desperation that cuts through ambient noise. "Please, my grandmother's condition is deteriorating. The doctor said if her fever spikes again..." That voice. James froze mid-stride. 6 years had passed, but he would recognize Olivia Parker's voice anywhere. Before his brain could process what was happening, his eyes registered 3 small figures beside her, identical boys, around 6 years old with unruly dark hair, and striking features that sent a jolt of recognition through him. His mother's distinctive green eyes, his grandfather's cleft chin, his own serious expression, replicated 3 times over. One of the boys tugged Olivia's sleeve. "Mom, why is that man staring at us?" Olivia turned, her eyes widening in shock as they locked with James's. The clipboard she'd been holding clattered to the floor, the sound abnormally loud in the suddenly quiet space. "James," she whispered, color draining from her face. He took a step forward, then another, his heart hammering against his ribs. The world around them seemed to blur and fade, leaving only Olivia and 3 small faces that mirrored his own. "These boys." His voice emerged strangled, barely audible. Olivia instinctively gathered the children closer, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. "Mason, Noah, Lucas," she said, her voice steady despite her pale face. "Why don't you sit over there for a moment?" As the boys retreated to nearby chairs, still watching curiously, James felt his carefully constructed reality crumbling. The timing, the identical features, the mathematical certainty struck him with physical force. "They're mine," he stated, not a question, but a revelation that altered his universe irrevocably. The next 24 hours passed in a blur for James. Sleep evaded him completely as he paced his penthouse, alternating between staring at the ceiling and gazing at Seattle's twinkling skyline. By morning, dark circles shadowed his bloodshot eyes, his normally immaculate appearance replaced by stubbled cheeks and rumpled clothes. At precisely noon, James arrived at Westlake Cafe where Olivia had agreed to meet. He spotted her immediately, still beautiful but with new lines of determination etched around her eyes. She approached his table cautiously, studying him before sitting down. "You look terrible," she said simply. James attempted a smile. "Hello." "To you too, Olivia." An awkward silence fell between them, 6 years of unspoken words hanging in the air. "Those boys," James finally whispered, his voice barely audible. "They're mine, aren't they?" Olivia nodded. "Yes, Mason, Noah, and Lucas are your sons, our sons." The confirmation hit James like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the table to steady himself. "Why didn't you tell me?" he managed. Olivia's eyes flashed. "I tried, James. I called dozens of times, I emailed, I even went to your office." Her voice cracked slightly. "Every attempt was intercepted by Catherine." "My sister." James felt the floor shift beneath him. She said she was protecting your interests, that a pregnancy would derail everything you'd worked for. Memories flooded back. Catherine handling his communications during those critical early months abroad, insisting he focus entirely on business. How many other parts of his life had she controlled? I never knew, he whispered, shame washing over him. But I should have made sure. I should have reached out myself. Being sorry doesn't change the fact that I raised 3 boys alone for 6 years, Olivia replied, her voice trembling with contained emotion. I want to meet them properly, James said suddenly. I want to be part of their lives. Olivia studied him for a long moment. It's not that simple. You can't just appear after 6 years and expect everything to be fine. Please, Olivia, give me a chance to make things right. She sighed, then nodded slowly. Friday evening, come to our house at 6:00. But this is on my terms, at my pace. If I see this affecting the boys negatively, it's over. Understand? Absolutely, James agreed immediately. Whatever you say. As Olivia stood to leave, James called after her. Thank you. She paused, looking back at him with eyes that had once loved him completely. Don't thank me yet, James. For my boys, you're a stranger. For me, you're someone who hurt me deeply. Trust takes time to rebuild. Her words followed him like shadows as he watched her walk away. The modest 2-story house in Ballard looked nothing like the luxury properties James typically frequented. As he parked his Tesla along the curb at precisely 5:55 p.m. on Friday, he felt distinctly out of place in this middle-class neighborhood where children's bicycles dotted front yards and family sedans filled driveways. For the 10th time, James checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, straightened his casual button-down shirt. Olivia had specifically requested no suits, and took a deep breath. In his hand, he clutched 3 identical gift bags containing carefully selected presents, model airplanes for boys who, according to Olivia's brief text, were fascinated with flight. The doorbell's cheerful chime contrasted sharply with the storm of anxiety inside him. When the door swung open, Olivia stood there, her expression a practiced mask of calm. You're on time, she noted, stepping aside to let him in. The boys are in the living room. I've told them that you're their father. James nodded, his throat too tight for words. As he followed Olivia down the short hallway, the sound of animated conversation grew louder. Then suddenly, there they were, 3 identical boys with his eyes sitting on a worn but comfortable-looking couch, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright suspicion. Boys, Olivia said, her voice gentle but firm. This is James Harrison. He's your father. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. James stood frozen, unsure what to do or say to these 3 small humans who shared his DNA but were complete strangers to him. One of the boys, wearing a red t-shirt with a rocket ship, stood up first. I'm Mason, he announced, extending his hand with surprising confidence. I'm the oldest by 4 minutes. James couldn't help but smile as he shook the small hand. It's very nice to meet you, Mason. Another boy, this one in a blue shirt and with a more thoughtful expression, approached more cautiously. I'm Noah. I'm in the middle. Are you really our dad? How come we never met you before? The directness of the question caught James off guard. Before he could formulate a response, the third boy, wearing green and remaining firmly on the couch, crossed his arms. He probably didn't want to meet us, the boy said, his young face already mastering a scowl that James recognized from his own childhood photos. That's why he never came before. Lucas, Olivia admonished gently. Remember what we talked about. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. James set down the gift bags and knelt to be at eye level with the boys. Your mother is right. I made a big mistake by not being here. I didn't know about you until I saw you at the hospital, but that's no excuse. If I had known, I would have been here sooner. Lucas's scowl didn't fade. Do you have other kids? No, James answered honestly. You 3 are my only children. Mason, ever the icebreaker, pointed to the bags. Are those for us? James arrived at Miller Park 30 minutes early, nervously scanning the Saturday morning crowd for familiar Faces he'd spent hours researching youth baseball rules, determined not to appear completely clueless about Mason's hobby. When Olivia arrived with the boys, James's heart swelled at the sight of Mason proudly wearing his team uniform, Noah with a book tucked under his arm, and Lucas trailing behind, still maintaining his suspicious distance. "You came," Mason exclaimed, surprisingly delighted. "I promised I would," James replied, the simple statement carrying more weight than any business contract he'd ever signed. Olivia seemed equally surprised by his punctuality. "Mason's playing second base today. The bleachers are over there." As they settled in to watch the game, James found himself genuinely invested in every pitch. He cheered enthusiastically when Mason made a play, drawing amused glances from Olivia. "Have you ever been to a professional game?" Noah asked quietly, looking up from his book during a lull in the action. "Many times," James answered. "Would you like to go sometime? All of you?" Noah's eyes widened. "The Mariners? Front row?" "Front row," James promised, then hesitated, glancing at Olivia for approval. She gave a slight nod. "If the boys would like that." "Even Lucas?" Noah whispered, glancing at his brother who sat determinedly on Olivia's other side, pretending not to listen. "Especially Lucas," James confirmed. When Mason's team won by a single run, the boy ran to James first, surprising everyone, including himself. Awkwardly, James high-fived him, fighting the instinct to hug this child who was still essentially a stranger. "Did you see my catch, Dad?" Mason asked, the word Dad falling casually from his lips. James froze, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I did. It was amazing." Later, as they enjoyed ice cream from a nearby stand, Mason's easy chatter filled the space between them. Even Noah occasionally added to the conversation, while Lucas silently observed, his ice cream melting untouched. "Are you going to live with us now?" Mason suddenly asked, the innocent question landing like a grenade. The adults exchanged panicked glances. "No," James finally answered. "I have my own place, but I'd like to spend a lot of time with you all, if that's okay." "Every day?" Mason pressed. "Well, I work a lot, like Mom," Noah interjected. "She works 2 jobs sometimes," Lucas added unexpectedly, his first voluntary contribution. James looked at Olivia questioningly. She shrugged, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Medical billing during the day, online classes at night. Single motherhood isn't cheap." For the first time, James truly comprehended the financial strain Olivia must have endured. His mind raced, with calculations, private school tuitions, college funds, health care, all expenses she'd shouldered alone while he'd been accumulating billions. The week passed in a flurry of activity, as James attempted to balance his corporate responsibilities with his newfound role as a father. He visited the boys twice more, once for a quick dinner, and once to help with homework, each visit peeling back another layer of their personalities. Mason was outgoing and adventurous, Noah introspective and brilliant, while Lucas remained wary, his talents hidden behind walls of self-protection. Friday afternoon found James in his downtown office, anxiously watching the clock during a video conference with international investors. The meeting was scheduled to end at 5 p.m., giving him plenty of time to reach the elementary school by 6:30 for the boys' concert. "As you can see, gentlemen, the Q3 projections are extremely favorable," James explained, clicking through his presentation with one eye on his watch. "We anticipate a 22% growth in the Asian markets alone." His phone vibrated silently against the desk. A text from Olivia. "Reminder, concert starts 6:30 sharp, boys are nervous." James sent a quick thumbs-up emoji, something he'd never done in a professional context before. His assistant, Miranda, gave him a curious look, but continued taking notes at 4:52 p.m. Just as James was preparing to conclude the meeting, a major investor from Singapore raised his hand. "Before we adjourn, Mr. Harrison, I have serious concerns about the supply chain disruptions in Malaysia. Perhaps we could extend our discussion." James felt a knot form in his stomach. "I'd be happy to address those concerns, Mr. Tan, but I'm afraid I have a prior commitment at 6:30 that I cannot reschedule." Miranda's eyebrows shot up in surprise. James Harrison never cut meetings short for personal reasons. Mr. Tan frowned. This is a $300 million commitment we're discussing, Mr. Harrison. Surely whatever dinner reservation you have can wait. Before James could respond, his phone began ringing. Olivia again. With an apologetic gesture to the video conference, he answered. James, it's an emergency. Olivia's voice was tight with panic. Noah fell at recess. We're at Seattle Children's. They think his arm might be broken. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I'll be right there, he said immediately, ending the call. He turned back to the stunned faces on the screen. Gentlemen, I apologize, but I have a family emergency. My son is in the hospital. Without waiting for responses, he ended the meeting and rushed toward the elevator, shouting instructions to Miranda about rescheduling. 20 minutes later, James sprinted through the hospital entrance, his tie askew and panic evident on his face. He found Olivia in the pediatric waiting area, Mason and Lucas sitting quietly beside her. Where is he? Is he okay? James demanded, out of breath. Olivia looked up, surprise registering in her eyes. He's getting an X-ray. The doctor thinks it's just a fracture, not a break. James collapsed into a chair beside Lucas, who was staring at his shoes. What happened? He fell from the monkey bars, Mason explained. There was blood. He's going to miss his violin solo, Lucas added quietly, his first voluntary words to James. He practiced for weeks. The implied accusation hung in the air. Ethan would miss his performance just as they all surely expected James to miss it as well. An hour later, when Noah emerged with a blue cast and pain medication, he brightened at seeing James. You came, he said simply. Of course I came, James replied, kneeling to examine the cast. You're my son. On the ride home, with Noah drowsy from medication in the backseat of Olivia's car and James following in his Tesla, his phone rang continuously with calls from Singapore. He silenced it without a second thought. Later that evening, as he helped Olivia put the exhausted boys to bed, his assistant texted, Mr. Tan has concerns about your commitment to the deal after today's abrupt departure. James typed back a response. That would have been unthinkable just a week earlier. He'll have to wait. Family emergency takes priority. As he left Olivia's house that night, he realized with perfect clarity that something fundamental had shifted in his world. For the first time in his adult life, James Harrison had chosen family over business without a moment's hesitation, and he didn't regret it for a second. The next morning, as James was preparing to take the boys to the Science Museum as promised, his phone rang. Catherine's name flashed on the screen. Finally answering my calls, his sister said coldly when he picked up. What's this I hear about you abandoning the Singapore meeting for some family emergency? Hello to you too, Catherine, James replied, his voice unusually firm. And yes, my son broke his arm. I needed to be there. Your son? Catherine's voice rose an octave. James, what are you talking about? I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, he countered. 3 boys, 6 years old. Olivia Parker's sons. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. You knew, James continued, his grip tightening, on the phone. You intercepted her messages, her calls. You kept my children from me for 6 years. I was protecting you, Catherine finally responded, her voice defensive. The company was at a critical juncture. A pregnancy scandal would have... They're not a scandal, James interrupted, fury rising in his voice. They're my sons, and you had no right to make that decision for me. James, be reasonable. We need to discuss this rationally. The board meeting on Monday. We'll discuss this later, he cut her off. Right now I have a promise to keep to 3 boys who deserve better than what either of us has given them so far. James hung up, his hands shaking with anger and resolution. The confrontation with his sister would have to wait. Today belonged to Mason, Noah, and Lucas. James's midnight oil burned bright as he attempted to salvage the Singapore deal remotely. After 3 hours of emergency calls, the investors had reluctantly agreed to a 1-week extension. Looking at his watch, 3:17 a.m., he realized he had promised to take the boys to the Science Museum the next morning. 4 hours of sleep would have to suffice. When he arrived at Olivia's house, coffee in hand and fatigue evident in his eyes, she gave him a concerned look. Rough night? Nothing important. He lied, forcing enthusiasm, as the boys bounded down the stairs. The museum trip started wonderfully. Mason raced from exhibit to exhibit, his energy infectious. Noah, despite his cast, methodically read every scientific explanation. Even Lucas showed excitement at the dinosaur display, momentarily dropping his guard. "Dad, look at this," Mason called, using that word "dad" that still sent a jolt through James's heart. "It's a real meteorite." James joined him, genuinely fascinated by his son's enthusiasm. As they examined the space rock together, James's phone vibrated. "Singapore again? I need to take this," he said apologetically, stepping away. "Just 2 minutes." The call stretched to 15 minutes as James paced behind a planetary exhibit, negotiating terms while watching his sons from afar. When he returned, the easy camaraderie had evaporated. Lucas's walls were back up. "You promised it would be quick," the boy accused. "I know, buddy. Work emergency, but I'm all yours now." Lucas shrugged, turning away. Whatever. By afternoon, James's phone had interrupted them 4 more times. During lunch at the museum cafe, it rang again. His assistant frantic about document revisions needed immediately. "I'm sorry," James sighed, looking at 3 disappointed faces. "This is really important." "More important than us?" Lucas asked, bluntly. The question hit like a physical blow. "Of course not, it's okay," Olivia interjected. "Boys, finish your lunch. Mr. Harrison needs to work." "Mr. Harrison?" James repeated, hurt by the formality. Olivia's eyes communicated volumes. "You're not earning Dad today." Before James could respond, his phone rang again. Singapore would not be ignored. "Take it," Olivia said coldly. "We'll meet you at the exit in an hour." When James finally finished his call marathon, he rushed to the museum exit. No sign of Olivia or the boys. A text arrived. "We took an Uber home." Lucas was upset. That evening, he drove to their house, heart heavy with regret. Lucas refused to come downstairs. "He's been practicing piano all afternoon," Olivia explained. "His recital is next weekend." "Olivia, I'm sorry. The Singapore deal—" "I don't care about Singapore, James," she interrupted. 3 little boys were excited to spend the day with their father, and instead they got to watch him walk away repeatedly to talk to strangers about money. "It's not about money," he protested weakly. "It's about responsibility. Thousands of employees depend on this deal." Olivia's eyes flashed. "And what about your responsibility to them?" She pointed upstairs. From above came the sound of halting piano notes. Lucas practicing the piece he should have performed yesterday. "You can't have it both ways, James," Olivia said quietly. "You can't be the devoted father and the always available CEO. Something has to give." The harsh fluorescent lights of James's office cast long shadows across the conference room as he stood before his executive team. It was Thursday, the day before Lucas's recital, and James had called an emergency meeting that surprised everyone, including himself. "I've made a decision," he announced, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Effective immediately, I'm implementing a company-wide restructuring." His COO, Victoria, exchanged concerned glances with the CFO. "Restructuring? James, we're in the middle of the Singapore negotiations. This isn't the time for—" "It's exactly the time," James interrupted, uncharacteristically firm. "For years, we've operated under the assumption that success requires constant availability and sacrifice of personal lives. I'm changing that paradigm." He clicked to the next slide of his hastily prepared presentation. "Family First Initiative. I'm instituting flexible work hours, remote work options, and a strict no-contact policy during designated family times, starting with myself." Dead silence filled the room. These executives had watched James build his empire through round-the-clock dedication and unwavering focus. The man standing before them now, talking about family time, was unrecognizable. "James," Victoria finally spoke, her tone careful. "Is everything okay? This seems sudden." He took a deep breath. I recently discovered I have 3 6-year-old sons. Triplets, actually, he added, a small smile playing at his lips. And I've been missing their entire lives because of the work, culture I created. That changes now. His phone buzzed. Singapore again. James silenced it without looking. The board won't approve this, his CFO warned. Tan is already questioning your commitment. Then I'll convince them, James replied simply, or I'll step down as CEO. The statement shocked even him. Had he really just threatened to abandon the company he'd built from nothing for children he'd known less than a month? Yes. Yes, he had. After the meeting, Catherine stormed into his office, waving her tablet displaying his presentation. You lost your mind? This family-first nonsense will tank our stock price overnight. Hello, Catherine, James said coldly. I've been meaning to have a chat with you. About what? Your sudden desire to dismantle everything we've built? About how you deliberately kept my children from me for 6 years? Catherine faltered momentarily before regaining her composure. I did what was necessary. You weren't ready for that responsibility, then. That wasn't your decision to make, James replied, his voice dangerously quiet. You robbed me of 6 years with my sons. You robbed them of their father. I was protecting our legacy, Catherine snapped. What do you think Mom and Dad would say if they could see you throwing everything away for some woman who conveniently shows up with 3 kids claiming they're yours? James's eyes narrowed. First, Olivia didn't show up. I saw them by chance. Second, there's no claiming about it. One look at them and there's no question they're mine. Have you even done a DNA test? Catherine demanded. I don't need one. But if it will shut you up, fine, I'll do it. Not because I have doubts, but because I never want you questioning my son's legitimacy again. Catherine studied her brother's face, seeing an unfamiliar determination there. The board meeting is Monday. You have until then to come to your senses. As she left, James turned to the window, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The empire he'd built stretched before him, but for the first time it felt hollow compared to the promise he'd made to be at Lucas's piano recital tomorrow evening. Friday morning arrived with James's phone blaring at 5 a.m. A crisis in the Singapore negotiations demanded immediate attention. He worked feverishly from his home office, rescheduling meetings and delegating responsibilities to ensure his afternoon would remain clear. At 11:20 a.m., his intercom buzzed. The board chairman had arrived unannounced. Richard, James greeted him cautiously. This is unexpected. The older man didn't waste time on pleasantries. What's this about restructuring the entire company and rumors you're considering stepping down? The board is in panic mode. I'm implementing changes to create a healthier work environment, James explained, offering coffee that Richard declined. Not stepping down unless forced to. This is about these children you suddenly discovered? Richard's tone was skeptical. James, I understand the shock, but making rash decisions that affect thousands of employees, there's nothing rash about it, James interrupted, his voice firm. I've given this considerable thought. In what? 2 weeks? Richard scoffed. You've spent 6 years building this company's Asian presence, and now you're willing to jeopardize everything for my sons, James finished. Yes, I am. Richard studied him carefully. The board meeting on Monday will be contentious. You need to be prepared. I'll be there with a complete proposal, James assured him, glancing at his watch. But right now, I have preparations to make for a piano recital. After Richard left, James made one last call to his Singapore team, establishing clear boundaries. No contact between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. tonight under any circumstances. At 4:30, he surprised his assistant by leaving the office with a bouquet of flowers. Cancel anything else that comes up, he instructed, family priority. James arrived at the elementary school auditorium 30 minutes early, securing a front row seat. The space filled quickly with parents clutching cameras and younger siblings fidgeting in formal clothes. Olivia arrived with Mason and Noah, surprise evident on her face when she spotted James already seated. You're early, she remarked as the boys slid in beside him. I wouldn't miss this, James replied simply, When the curtain rose, revealing a nervous line of young performers, James's eyes immediately found Lucas. The boy looked small behind the grand piano, his face a mask of concentration as he searched the audience. When he spotted James, his eyes widened slightly. James gave him an encouraging thumbs up, and something magical happened. Lucas smiled at him, a genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Then his small fingers touched the keys, and James's world narrowed to this moment. This child. This music. Lucas played beautifully, his technique remarkable for his age. Emotion welled in James's chest. Pride, love, regret for the years missed, all mixing together until he found himself blinking back unexpected tears. When the performance ended, James was the first on his feet, applauding with unrestrained enthusiasm. As Lucas took his bow, his eyes found his father's again, and the smile that spread across his face was worth more than any business deal. Afterward, as families mingled in the crowded hallway, Lucas approached James hesitantly. "Did you really like it?" he asked, his voice small. James knelt to his level. "I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." He offered the flowers, and Lucas accepted them with a solemn nod that didn't quite hide his pleasure. "I practiced a lot," he admitted. "I could tell," James replied. "You're incredibly talented." Olivia watched this exchange with guarded hope, while Mason and Noah jostled for their father's attention, eager to show him the art display down the hall. As James allowed himself to be led through the school by three increasingly comfortable boys, his phone remained silent in his pocket. For the first time in his adult life, James Harrison was fully present in a moment that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with connection. Later, as he helped Olivia load tired boys into her car, she studied him thoughtfully. "Something's different about you tonight," she observed. James smiled. "I made a choice today, Olivia. The right one." He didn't elaborate, but as he watched her drive away, he felt the certainty of his new direction settling into his bones. Mondays. Board meeting would be challenging, but tonight had confirmed what his heart already knew. He was finally investing in what truly mattered. The weekend passed peacefully, with James spending Saturday helping Noah with a science project, and Sunday taking all three boys to a Mariners game. Even Lucas was warming to him, occasionally letting his guard down to reveal a dry wit that reminded James startlingly of himself at that age. Monday morning arrived too quickly. James entered the boardroom in his sharpest suit, 13 pairs of eyes tracking his every move. Catherine sat at the far end, her expression impenetrable. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began, "thank you for convening. I understand there are concerns about my recent proposals." For the next hour, James presented his vision with the confidence that had built his empire. Charts displayed productivity increases at companies with family-friendly policies. Architectural renderings showed his revolutionary campus concept, office buildings surrounding green spaces, adjacent to a state-of-the-art childcare facility. "This isn't just about my personal situation," James explained. "This is about recognizing our employees as whole people with lives beyond these walls." The discussion was heated. Board members raised valid concerns about costs, implementation challenges, and shareholder reactions. James addressed each methodically, his resolve unwavering. "Bottom line," asked Diana, a longtime board member, "why this drastic change now?" James paused, considering a politically safe answer before opting for honesty. 3 weeks ago, I discovered I have 3 6-year-old sons I never knew existed. Boys I've missed watching grow up because I was building this company instead. The boardroom grew uncomfortably quiet. "I'm not asking permission to be their father," James continued. "That's non-negotiable. I'm proposing a way for Harrison Innovations to lead a corporate revolution." When the vote came, it was closer than James had hoped. 7 in favor, 6 opposed, with Catherine abstaining. As the room cleared, she approached him. "This isn't over, James. You're making a terrible mistake." He met her gaze steadily. "The only mistake was missing 6 years of my son's lives. I won't miss another day." The doorbell's cheerful chime cut through the Saturday morning cartoon marathon that had the triplets entranced. Olivia, up to her elbows in pancake batter, called out, "Can you get that, Mason?" Mason bounded to the door expecting James, who had promised to take them to the park. Instead, he found an older couple with suitcases. "Grandma, Grandpa," he shouted excitedly. Olivia froze in the kitchen, pancake batter dripping onto the floor. Her parents' surprise visits were typically delightful, but today of all days. "Mom, Dad." She hurried to the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "And missed the chance to surprise our grandsons?" Her mother laughed, already being mobbed by 3 excited boys. "Thomas had a conference in Seattle canceled, so we thought we'd drive up from Portland." Olivia's father kissed her cheek. "You look tired, sweetheart. Everything okay?" Before she could answer, the sound of a luxury car pulling up drew everyone's attention. James emerged from his Tesla looking casual but impeccable in designer jeans and a polo shirt. "Who's that?" her father asked, his protective instincts immediately triggered. "That's our dad," Mason announced proudly, racing outside. The stunned silence from her parents was deafening. Olivia closed her eyes briefly, summoning strength for the inevitable confrontation. "Your father?" her mother repeated in disbelief. The time James reached the door, his confident stride had faltered under the icy stares of Olivia's parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he extended his hand, which Thomas Parker shook with excessive firmness. "I'm James Harrison." "Oh, we know exactly who you are," Thomas replied coldly. "The man who abandoned our daughter 6 years ago." An uncomfortable silence fell, broken only by Noah's practical observation. "I don't think we'll all fit in Dad's car for the park now." An hour later, the adults sat in strained silence around the kitchen table while the boys played in the backyard. Olivia had explained the recent developments, though her parents remained skeptical. "So you just happened to spot them at the hospital and suddenly decided to become Father of the Year?" Thomas challenged, arms crossed. James met his gaze steadily. "I understand your skepticism, sir. I don't deserve an easy welcome into their lives." "No, you don't," Ellen Parker agreed. "Our daughter worked 2 jobs while taking night classes. To provide for these boys, where were you?" "Building an empire that meant nothing," James replied honestly. "I didn't know about the boys, but that's no excuse. I should have answered Olivia's calls." "He's really trying, Dad," Olivia interjected, softly. "He's been consistent these past weeks." Thomas scoffed. "Weeks? Parenthood isn't a corporate project you can dabble in when it's convenient, young man." The conversation might have continued its downward spiral had Lucas not entered quietly, hovering in the doorway. "Grandpa," he spoke up unexpectedly. "Dad helped me practice my piano piece every night this week. Even when his phone kept ringing, he didn't answer it." The simple testament from the normally reserved boy caught everyone by surprise. 6 months into James's journey of fatherhood, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The Family First initiative had transformed Harrison Innovations' corporate culture, but the financial impact was beginning to show. Stock prices had dipped amid concerns about the massive investment in the new family-friendly campus under construction. Catherine had rallied, dissatisfied board members and investors, questioning James's leadership in analyst calls and private meetings. The pressure was mounting, but James remained steadfast in his commitment to balance work and fatherhood. One evening, as James coached Lucas through a particularly challenging piano piece at Olivia's house, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from Victoria. "Emergency situation. Hostile takeover attempt in progress. Conference call in 30 minutes." James stared at the screen, his stomach dropping. This was the crisis he'd feared. Catherine had finally made her move. "Something wrong?" Lucas asked, noticing his father's expression. "Just work stuff," James replied, forcing a smile. "Let's finish this section before I have to go." Lucas studied him with those penetrating green eyes that missed nothing. "Is it bad?" James hesitated, then nodded. "Pretty bad, buddy. Someone's trying to take my company away." Lucas considered this. "Because you spend time with us now, Litai?" Simple, perceptive question caught James off guard. "Partly," he admitted. "Do you regret it?" Lucas asked quietly. Coming to find us? James set the phone down and turned fully toward his son. Not for a single second, he said firmly. You boys are the best thing that's ever happened to me. Lucas nodded, satisfied, then surprised James by saying, You should go fix your company problem. We'll be here when you're done. James arrived at his office to find Victoria and the CFO surrounded by legal documents. Catherine's aligned with Meridian Tech, Victoria explained. They've secured commitments from enough shareholders to force a vote on new leadership. For the next 5 hours, James worked relentlessly, calling loyal investors and developing counter-strategies. Past midnight, as the situation stabilized temporarily, Victoria studied him thoughtfully. You know, the easiest solution would be to scale back the Family First initiative. It's what Catherine's using against you, claiming you've lost focus. James shook his head. That's not an option, even if it costs you the company. Some things are worth more than corporate control, James replied. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed that. Now I know it's true. When James returned to his apartment, he found Olivia waiting in the lobby, surprising him. Lucas told me what happened, she explained. I wanted to make sure you were okay. Their relationship had evolved from tense co-parenting to genuine friendship over these months, but this level of concern was new. I may lose the company, James admitted. Olivia touched his arm gently. And if you do? James smiled, unexpectedly calm. Then I'll start something new, something that honors what I've learned about what really matters. The look in Olivia's eyes shifted, seeing the man James had become, so different from the ambitious young entrepreneur who had left her 6 years ago. The shareholders' meeting loomed like a gathering storm. James had spent weeks shoring up support, but Catherine's alliance with Meridian Tech had created a formidable opposition. The vote on his continued leadership was too close to call, as James reviewed his presentation one final time in his office. His phone lit up with Olivia's name. His heart quickened. She rarely called during work hours. James? Her voice was tight with worry. It's Noah. There's been an accident at school. He's at Seattle Children's. What happened? James was already grabbing his keys. Science experiment. Gone wrong. Some chemicals splashed. They're worried about his eyes. James glanced at his watch. The shareholders' meeting would begin in 40 minutes. The vote that would determine his company's future. I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. Victoria burst into his office as he was logging off his computer. Where are you going? The meeting. Noah's in the hospital. Eye injury. Victoria paled. But James, without you there, I know exactly what will happen, he finished for her. Present my statement. Tell them I stand by every decision I've made, especially the Family First initiative. They'll vote you out, Victoria warned. James handed her his presentation folder. Then they vote me out, my son needs me. 20 minutes later, James rushed into the pediatric emergency room to find Olivia pacing anxiously, Mason and Lucas sitting quietly in the corner. How is he? James asked, breathless. They're flushing his eyes. The doctor said they caught it quickly, but Olivia's voice broke. James pulled her into a hug, surprising both of them. He'll be okay, he assured her, though his own heart was pounding with fear. Aren't you supposed to be at your big meeting? Lucas asked, his perceptive gaze missing nothing. This is more important, James answered simply. Lucas studied him for a long moment, then nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a truth they both understood. An hour passed in tense waiting. James's phone vibrated constantly with messages from the shareholders' meeting, but he ignored them all. Finally, a doctor emerged. The good news is we've neutralized the chemical completely, she explained. There's some corneal irritation, but with proper treatment, we expect a full recovery. He's asking for both of you. Relief washed over James as they followed the doctor to Noah's room. The boy looked small in the hospital bed, patches covering both eyes. Dad? Noah called out tentatively. Mom said you'd come. I'm right here, buddy, James said, taking his hand. They said I have to keep these on overnight, Noah explained. Will you? Will you stay and read to me? I can't see my book. I'll read as long as you want, James promised, his voice thick with emotion. As evening fell, James sat beside Noah's bed reading chapter after chapter of their current adventure story. Mason and Lucas had been brought home by Olivia's parents, but she remained, seated across from James, their shared concern creating a bridge between them. During a pause when Noah had fallen asleep, Olivia checked her phone and gasped softly. "What is it?" James asked. She turned the screen toward him. The business news headline was stark. Harrison ousted. Board votes for new leadership. "James, I'm so sorry," she whispered. He glanced at Noah's sleeping form, then back at the headline, and realized something profound. The news that should have devastated him only weeks ago now seemed distant, almost trivial compared to what truly mattered. "I'm not," he replied quietly. For the first time, I was exactly where I needed to be. His phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "It's done. 9-4 against. Catherine takes over as interim CEO. Call me when you can." James switched his phone to silent and returned to the book, continuing to read softly to his sleeping son, a strange peace settling over him despite everything he'd just lost. 2 weeks after losing control of Harrison Innovations, James sat in his home office reviewing proposals from investors interested in his next venture. The news of his ouster had sparked unexpected interest in the tech community. Many were curious about what the visionary founder would do next. But James's attention kept drifting to the framed photo on his desk. 3 identical boys standing proudly beside a science fair project they'd built together. Noah's eyes had healed completely, and the experience had only strengthened the bonds between father and sons. A knock at his door pulled him from his thoughts. Olivia stood there, hesitant in a way he hadn't seen recently. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always," James replied, closing his laptop. Olivia sat across from him, fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. "The boys and I have been talking. They're worried about you." James smiled. "They don't need to be. I'm fine." "Are you?" Olivia pressed. "You lost the company you built from nothing." "And gained something far more valuable," he replied simply. "I don't regret my choice, Olivia, not for a second." She studied him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. "You really have changed. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better," she affirmed, echoing words from months ago. "Which is why the boys and I were wondering if you'd consider moving in with us." James stared at her, certain he'd misheard. "Moving in? The commute between 2 houses is hard on everyone," Olivia explained quickly. "We have that guest room that's barely used, and the boys would love having you around more and—" "What about you?" James interrupted gently. "Would you love having me around more?" Color rose in Olivia's cheeks. I think I would." The admission hung in the air between them, fragile and momentous. "I'm not suggesting we jump back into a relationship," Olivia clarified, "but we're co-parents and friends, and maybe we could see where this goes," James finished for her. She nodded, meeting his eyes. "I'd like that," James said softly. "Very much." Before they could explore this new territory further, James's phone rang. Victoria's name flashed on the screen. "I should take this," he apologized. Victoria had resigned from Harrison Innovations days after his departure, loyalty that had touched him deeply. "James," Victoria's voice was urgent. "Have you seen the news? The Meridian deal is falling apart. There are allegations of improper disclosure. The stock is in freefall." James quickly pulled up the financial news on his laptop. Harrison Innovations. Shares had plummeted 30% in a single day. "Catherine's called an emergency board meeting," Victoria continued. "They're considering reinstating you." "What?" James felt like the floor had shifted beneath him. "They want to meet tomorrow. The condition is that you agree to a modified version of your Family First initiative, scaled back but not eliminated." After the call ended, James sat in stunned silence. Olivia, who had heard enough to understand, touched his arm. "You could get your company back," she said. "Yes," James nodded slowly. "But on different terms. What will you do?" James looked at the photo of his sons again, then at Olivia. "Would dinner at 7 work? I think we should discuss this as a family." That evening, around Olivia's dining table, James explained the situation to everyone, including the boys who listened with surprising attentiveness. "So they want you to be the boss again?" Mason asked. "But not do as many family things?" Noah added, perceptive as always. "That's what they're proposing," James confirmed. Lucas, who had been quietly contemplating, finally spoke. "Will you still come to my piano recitals?" The simple question cut to the heart of the matter. James reached across the table and took his son's hand. "Always," he promised, "no matter what happens with the company." Later, after the boys were in bed, James and Olivia sat on the porch swing, contemplating the stars and the future. "I think I know what I'm going to do," James said quietly. "Tell me," Olivia encouraged. "I'm going to take back the company," he began, "but on my terms. Non-negotiable family time written into my contract. Continued development of the family campus, even if on a revised timeline. They might not agree. Then I'll walk away and build something new," James said with certainty. "Either way, what matters most is already right here." He took her hand, and this time Olivia didn't pull away. The boardroom of Harrison Innovations fell silent as James entered, his confident stride reminiscent of the CEO who had built the company from nothing, yet different in subtle ways. 6 months after being reinstated as CEO, he carried himself with the balanced assurance of a man who understood his true priorities. Behind him walked Mason, Noah, and Lucas, now 7 years old and wide-eyed at the imposing glass and steel headquarters. Today was the official ribbon-cutting ceremony for the completed family campus, and James had insisted his sons participate. "Gentlemen, ladies," James addressed the board members who had once voted him out, "I'd like you to meet the architects of our new direction." Catherine, who had remained on the board despite the leadership change, watched her nephews with a complicated expression. The past year had transformed her relationship with James from bitter opposition to cautious reconciliation. Weekly dinners with the boys had slowly melted her corporate ice queen persona, revealing the aunt who taught Lucas advanced piano techniques and encouraged Noah's scientific experiments. "The family campus is officially complete," James announced, "on time and under the revised budget." What he didn't mention was how much of his personal fortune he'd invested to make it happen after scaling back the corporate contribution. Some sacrifices didn't need public acknowledgement. Richard, the board chairman who had once questioned James's commitment, now nodded approvingly. The company's stock had not only recovered, but reached new heights as employee retention improved dramatically, and Harrison Innovations became known as the tech industry's most family-friendly employer. "The tour begins in 10 minutes, James concluded. "My sons will assist me as they've been inspecting the playground equipment very thoroughly over the past weeks." Laughter rippled through the room, warming even Catherine's reserved smile. As the boys led the board members toward the elevators, Victoria held James back momentarily. "You pulled it off," she said quietly. "Everything you promised that day when you first told us about your sons." James watched as Lucas expertly explained the campus layout to an impressed board member. "Not everything happens in the boardroom, Victoria. The real victory was last night." The previous evening had indeed been momentous. After a family dinner celebrating Lucas's piano competition win, Olivia had put the boys to bed while James cleaned up the kitchen. When she returned, they'd settled on the porch swing that had become their nightly ritual. "James," Olivia had said softly, "the boys and I have been talking." His heart had quickened. After nearly a year of slowly rebuilding their relationship, of careful steps forward and occasional steps back, they had reached a comfortable co-parenting arrangement. James had moved into the guest room 6 months ago, and while their relationship had deepened beyond friendship, both remained cautious about defining what they were becoming. "They think it's silly that you're still sleeping in the guest room," Olivia had continued, a hint of mischief in her eyes. James had struggled to find words. And what do you think? She'd taken his hand then, her touch sending familiar electricity through him. I think it's time to stop being afraid of what we might lose and focus on what we've found. Olivia Parker, he'd whispered. Are you asking me to move into your bedroom? I'm asking for more than that, she'd replied. I'm asking if you're ready for us to be a real family. Now, as James guided the board through the family campus with his sons proudly showing off their favorite features, he felt a completeness he'd never imagined possible. The daycare center, the flexible workspaces, the medical facility, the outdoor recreation areas, all represented his vision for a workplace that honored the whole person. As they approached the central courtyard where employees' families had gathered for the ceremony, James spotted Olivia talking with her parents, who had become surprisingly strong advocates for James once they'd witnessed his transformation. The small velvet box in his pocket seemed to burn with possibility. The ribbon cutting went perfectly, with each boy holding a section of the oversized scissors alongside their father. Cameras flashed as James delivered a speech about corporate responsibility and work-life integration. What the press wouldn't capture was the private moment that followed. As the crowd dispersed toward the reception, Lucas tugged at James's sleeve. Dad, he said quietly, we made something for you. The three boys presented James with a crudely wrapped package. Inside was a framed drawing of their family, James, Olivia, and the three boys, standing before a house with a swing on the rear porch. We know you're going to ask Mom to marry you, Noah explained matter-of-factly. We found the ring in your sock drawer. James couldn't help but laugh. And you're okay with that? Duh, Mason rolled his eyes. You already live with us. But this makes it official, Lucas added seriously. We're giving you permission. James knelt to their level, his heart so full it threatened to burst. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Your approval means everything to me. We love you, Dad, the boys said in unison. The three simple words that had once broken James completely now rebuilding him in ways he never thought possible. As he embraced his sons, James caught Olivia's eye across the courtyard. Her smile held the promise of their future, not perfect, but perfectly theirs. James Harrison had lost an empire and found a kingdom. In the eyes of three boys who had his smile, he had discovered the truth that would guide the rest of his days. Success wasn't measured in stock prices or corporate acquisitions, but in moments of connection that no balance sheet could ever quantify.